And in the aaker branding book, which you will have, it's this one here. I changed the name from brand identity to brand vision. I just like brand vision better. And the model kind of has two main components. It's got several others, but two of the most important are that a brand is multidimensional. It's not a three-word phrase. And that's what it drives a lot of people's brand strategy. They want it to stand for one concept. And it's just not the way it is. Brands are more complicated. They require 6 or 12 dimensions to really understand them, to really be able to manage them properly. And the second major element of the model is that there's no fill in the blocks. There's no preconceived dimensions that you have to obey. Rather, given your brand and your context, you develop the dimensions that are going to work for you in that situation. And so that's it, multidimensional, and you select the dimensions. Let me give you an example of a brand vision model. This comes from the Haas Brand Business School at the UC Berkeley. That's where I taught for quite a few years. The Haas Business School, which is vaulted into one of the top 4 or 5 business schools in the United States, because of this vision, people at Haas are beyond yourself. They're looking at something that's more important than their own sales, their own profits, their own career advancement, beyond yourself. Students always. They're engaged in lifelong learning. It's just not in the classroom. Question the status quo. They're innovative. They're looking to bold ideas, taking risks. And confidence without attitude. And believe me, that's really differentiating. Because most business school students in India as well as here have a bit of an attitude. And but rather it's about collaboration and trust. And the essence of the school, which kind of summarizes all that, is to develop leaders that redefine how we do business. And this vision really has affected everything that's done at the Haas Business School. It's affected their courses, the professors, the students, everything. I want to talk about two elements of a brand vision that are often that resonate with the audience and differentiate from competitors. The first is the brand personality. If their brand was a person, what kind of a person would it be? And a brand personality is really powerful because it can, for example, represent self-expressive benefits. If you're a driver of a Prius, which is a brand that dominated the compact hybrid market all across the world, but if you drive a Prius, what that tells you as a person is that you're really willing to do something about the environment. You're driving a hybrid. And it says something about you as a person. It says something about what Prius is as having a brand personality. A brand personality is really a really good way to understand the relationship you want to have with your customer. You can be a family member. You can be an inspiring leader. You can be a mentor. You can be a stimulating companion. You could be a friend with a shared interest. And asking yourself, what is the personality of my brand can lead you to one of these relationships. Now, every brand doesn't have to have a personality, but those that do create a personality have a big edge. A personality can even be a way to represent functional benefits. the MetLife insurance company is warm and approachable. Tough job for an insurance company, but it all comes from the personality that was grafted onto MetLife by the Snoopy character. Employees don't want to work for a company that's only interested in profit. They want a higher purpose, especially millennials. And customers, at least some customers, they want to have a relationship with a customer, with a firm they respect and even admire. And that's where a higher purpose comes in. There's three kinds of higher purposes in my estimation. The first is I call an offering-driven higher purpose. So like Steve Jobs used to say about Apple, their purpose is to create insanely great products. Insanely great products. So it's not, the purpose of Steve Jobs was never to make money, never to have high sales. It was to create insanely great products. And he inspired his employees and customers alike. Lego just doesn't make things, it inspires and develops the builders of tomorrow. But what if your company makes something like bar soap? Pretty hard to have an offering-driven higher purpose. But you can have a social higher purpose. Lifebuoy Soap has a social program, Help a Child Reach 5. It turns out that 2 million children die before the age of 5 each year. And most die from waterborne illnesses. And so if you can get people to wash their hands right, you can eliminate a lot of those deaths. The Lifebuoy has a program to try to get 1 billion people to wash their hands better. And they use all kinds of mechanisms to do that. They've already halfway to their goal. It's quite amazing. And later today I'll show you a video that explains their program as it applied to a village. And there's another way you can develop a higher purpose if you don't have an offering-driven one, and that's with an environmental higher purpose. So Patagonia, the outdoor clothing manufacturer, has is a higher purpose that gives them a lot of energy in the marketplace. They have a program to recycle, repair, reuse, and reduce the purchase of new fabrics so that you can conserve energy that it takes to make them. So anyway, there's those three kinds of higher purpose, and that often, not always, but often can be a part of the brand vision. There's an old story about a fellow walking along the road, and he saw somebody working, and he said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I lay bricks, and I'm really good at it." Walked a little further, and he asked another fellow what he's doing, and he said he's building a wall. And look at how fine it is. The third guy he asked, though, said he's building a cathedral. Now, wouldn't you rather work for a company in which you were building a cathedral than building a wall or laying bricks? That's what a higher purpose is about. Let me turn to the second big idea, and that's where we turn from brand preference competition to brand leadership competition. It all started for me when I analyzed some data, some beer data in Japan. I looked at 35 years of data, and I observed that market share only changed 4 times. And they were, on closer examination, all explained by the formation of whole new subcategories. Market share was constant for 15 years. Kirin had 60% and Asahi had 10%. And then Asahi formed a whole new subcategory. They came out with Super Dry, a beer that had a higher alcohol content. It had a sharp, clean taste, and it was associated with all kinds of Western association, which for the younger people meant that it was contemporary and modern. In 2 years, Asahi lost 10% of share points and Asahi gained 10%. Amazing. And then I looked at other categories, computers, banks, water, cars, hotels, yogurt. It was always the same. If you saw a large surge in sales, it was almost always explained by somebody had formed a new subcategory. They had really changed what people bought. They had discovered a customer must-have that didn't exist before. So I believe there's two routes to winning, two ways to compete. The first is brand preference competition. And what the marketing is about is my brand is better than your brand in some defined category. And R&D is spent on incremental innovation, making the brand a little bit better than it was last year. Winning is about making the competitors not preferred. That's brand preference competition. It is so not fun. And it almost never leads to growth. And then there's brand leadership competition. Very different. It's all about creating must-haves, which define a whole new subcategory. The innovation is about substantial change. It's about transformational change. And winning is different too. It's about when competitors are not even considered. They're not relevant. And that's what really stimulates growth. So how to win a subcategory competition? First, you've got to innovate to create a must-have that defines a whole new subcategory. And there's a lot of ways to do that. You can look at underserved segments like creating an energy bar for women. You can be the innovative brand that simultaneously creates value. You can have values that connect, like you share with the brand an interest in the environment, and you develop some environmental programs. That would be a way to create a whole new subcategory. Instead of selling components, you can start making systems. And the systems, it turns out, generate a lot of functional benefit. And you can have an augmented relationship. Instead of dealing with a retailer with 40 or 50 products, you can have a relationship, one organization to the retailer organization. Different kind of relationship. You can reframe a category without even changing the brand. Pampers in China had a great product, but the mothers didn't really value convenience and dryness. But Pampers did some research, and they found out that what mothers did value was quality of baby sleep. And they did some research that showed that babies that used Pampers went to sleep faster. They slept 30 minutes more. They had 50% less distraction during their sleep. So Pampers started the Golden Sleep campaign about sound sleep, sound development. And the Pampers disposable diaper subcategory went from virtually nothing to over $3 billion of 3 or 4 years later. So what they had done is they reframed the category, and in doing so created a very new subcategory which they dominated. Just one other observation. You need to have significant innovation, but you don't have to be the first. You only have to be the first to get it right. The iPod wasn't the first. Sony had the iPod 2 years before Apple. Microsoft had the iPad 2 years before Apple. And remember all those flip phones that were out before the iPhone? iPhone wasn't first, but they were the first to get it right. Second thing you have to do is create barriers to competition. Because if you get in there with a new idea and competitors immediately enter and become relevant, that means they are visible and credible, then it's really not been worth it. Well, let me tell you 3 ways to create barriers. First, brand the innovation. Uniqlo, the clothing retailer, developed a lot of different fabrics. One of them they called Heat Tech, a lightweight fabric that creates heat to warm you up and keep you warm. Incredible thing. They've got this on 200 different types of clothing, and you can only get it at Uniqlo. So branding the innovation is one way. Westin Hotel did that with a bed they developed called the Heavenly Bed. A second thing you can do is become a moving target. Chrysler developed a minivan and went 16 years with no competition. 16 years. They sold like 12 million units. No competition. And one reason was that they kept innovating. They developed the front engine 4-wheel drive. They developed swivel and go seating. They developed the integrated child booster. And about every 2 years, they'd have a whole new set of innovations. They became a moving target. So anybody attempting to join the new subcategory had a hard time. And finally, you can become the exemplar brand. You can become the brand that represents a category, the brand that can manage the category, the brand that's the most relevant, the most visible, the most credible with respect to the category. And that was certainly true with Heavenly Bread, with the Westin bed. When you wanted a premium bed in a hotel, the Westin has got the authentic bed. It's got the Heavenly Bed. Jerry Garcia, the Grateful Dead, said, "You do not merely want to be considered just the best of the best. You want to be considered the only one who do what you do. The only one." That's a way to win. That's a really way to grow. Well, let me turn now to a more tactical issue. How do you communicate your strategic message these days? We've got this incredibly cluttered media space. We've got disinterested customers or audience who don't have any interest in your offering or your brand or your firm. And even if you did get through to them, they're very skeptical. You're just trying to sell me something. You're not being honest. So what do you do? One of your approaches is to look at the customer sweet spots. Look at what customers are interested in. And make your brand an active and interested partner in that customer sweet spot, that set of interests and activities they're interested in. Make it a shared interest. And now you're talking about them with a subject that they are interested in. Let me just give you a few examples. Harley Davidson has the Harley club called HOGS, the Harley Owners Group. And these people are get together and on the internet and in groups, and they go on rides. They go to events. They compare information about maps, about equipment, about maintenance. And so this is a way for Harley to encourage them to have a passion about what they do. And Harley is a part of it. It's a partner. 120 years ago, John Deere made tractors. And they came out with a magazine called The Furrow. And The Furrow was not about selling tractors. It was about talking about how to be a better farmer, how to enjoy your rural lifestyle. The Furrow's out even today, and 2 million people read that magazine every 3 months all around the world. Sephora is a skincare company, and they have Beauty Inside Community, a branded community. And there people can come and join groups and that others that share their beauty interests. They can talk about it. They can get inspired with pictures. They can chat with each other. They can get advice. They can see community events. And this is a branded community. And you can see that Sephora gets its point across by having people participate in this. Over 1 million people come to this website every month. Pampers, people aren't really interested in finding or receiving information about disposable diapers, but they care about babies. So they come to baby care. People aren't interested in Simon & Schuster talking about their latest books, but they are interested in book reviews and sharing ideas about what's a good book you've read. Avon is, involved in breast cancer, and they have the Avon Walk for Breast Cancer. And that does involve people. That does attract their audience, these women that have experienced directly or indirectly breast cancer, and they're active, and they go on these walks. And it's a program that's educated 100 million women. It's raised $640 million. And you see, you contrast that with Avon running ads about their products. Just think about brand goals we have. The one is to be visible. That's part of being relevant, especially to a new category. You got to be visible. You got to have energy. You want to have relationships that go beyond transactions. You want to be liked. You want to be a social media player. So how do you do that? Well, if you find the sweet spot and you develop a brand community, or you somehow become an active partner, you do all those things. And if you just run ads about your offering, you don't do none of those things. Well, let me turn to a second way you can break through the clutter and tell your strategic message. And that is using stories. I after doing all this work with branding, working with companies on their brand, I realized the importance of telling your strategic message internally to employees and externally to customers. The strategic vision is the brand vision is what you want to stand for. And it's really powerful stuff, and you want people to find out about it. really, really important. At the same time, as I pointed out, it's difficult to break through the clutter. It's a mess out there. And furthermore, the audience doesn't care. They're disinterested. The audience is skeptical. So what do? Well, there comes the power of stories. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of studies that show dramatically that if you compare communicating a message as a set of facts or a description of programs or an offering, as compared to you have the same message embedded in a story, story wins. Gets attention. It changes perceptions. It is remembered. It inspires. It energizes. And I'm not talking about 20% better or 30% better. I'm talking about 200% better or 300% better. It's just amazing, the power of a story. But what I've done in this other book, the Creating Signature Stories, is to find a particular kind of story, which I call a signature story. It's a narrative, not a set of facts. It's not a description of an offering or a program. It's a narrative. Once upon a time, something happened to some person. The narrative. Second, it has a wow breakthrough capability. The story is so entertaining, so informative, or so relevant to what you do that you just say wow, and you're in sort of want to share it with somebody because it's such an important thing that just happened. And third, it implies a strategic message with authenticity. So embedded in the story needs to be a strategic message in some that gets through in some way. Now, see, the great thing about a story is the audience does not counter-argue. They don't say, yeah, but. They don't say, this guy's selling me something, or this is, I don't believe this. It's just a story. You don't counter-argue with a story. So let me go back to the Lifebuoy and show you what a really strong story is. Now, Lifebuoy put this program of theirs, Help a Child Reach 5, into some small villages in India, and they made videos on 3 of them. The video followed a mother that had just watched her child reach 5, and you see what incredibly emotional achievement this was. And so can we play this? I want you to think about that video, because I really would like you to think about developing signature stories, and this is really a good role model. And think, it almost makes you cry. It's so emotional. And, there was a study that was done just recently about what makes something go viral. These set of 3 videos got 44 million views. 44 million, and it's bar soap. And a study was just published this month that examined what makes something go viral. And the answer was that it has to be emotional. It really has to tap some kind of emotional to go viral. And this video certainly did. And again, this is bar soap. And can you imagine the power of this program for a bar soap brand? and not incidentally, how much good it has done. Let me just give you one more example, and that is Charity Water. The mission of Charity Water is to bring clean and safe drinking water to 665 million people in developing countries that lack access now. And in the last 10 or 12 years, they've reached over 8 million people with 26,000 projects. And let me tell you about one of those projects. It's in a small village in Mozambique. And in that village, there's a girl named Natalia, 15 years old. And Natalia's story is something. She would spend every day walking to a dirty little pond where she would get water, walk back. It took her hours. Then she'd have to boil the water and feed her 6 brothers and sisters. She could only had time to go to school twice a week. And then Charity Water came in and put a well into her village. And then her life changed. She would just go to the well in the morning, get her water. She was able to go to school every day. And it was a new world for her. Charity Water sent a team of people to interview the water committee. Every time they have a new well, there needs to be a water committee, because it has to be a local governance that helps maintain the well and helps educated people how to use it and how to keep it working. So each one of these members of the committee introduced themselves to the Charity Water team. And the last person to introduce herself was this girl with her hand folded. It was Natalia. And she said, "I am the president." Natalia was chosen president because of her confidence, her tenacity, her leadership. She could read and write. And it really changed her. Now she's not only going to be a teacher, she's going to be a headmaster. That's her goal. And I think it'll happen too. So this is a story that really touches you as well. And it tells the message of Charity Water so well. So much better than any description could tell. Now, one of the things that I want to emphasize is that the story does not have to communicate all the information in the context of the story. The story can motivate facts and programs, like 1 in 10 lack access to clean water, 30,000 wells, and so on. Because after you hear the story, then you're more receptive to hearing about facts and programs. And it can go the other way. You can have the facts and programs first, and then you can bring it to life with a story. And then the facts and programs will be much more meaningful. They'll be much more likely to be remembered. Some final thoughts. Stories are powerful. Facts and program and offering descriptions are not. In terms of getting attention, changing perceptions, persuading, inspiring, energizing, stimulating action. But it's not just stories, but it has to be signature stories that have a wow breakthrough in quality that tell a strategic message. So that's it. 4 big ideas. You need a brand vision, be multidimensional, has to resonate with the audience, it has to differentiate you from others. And you need to, when you have a chance, you need to develop must-haves, that define new subcategories that change what people buy, and you have to move from brand preference competition to brand leadership. And you have to, when it comes to communicate with a cluttered media environment, disinterested and skeptical audience, you need to find a way to communicate. And one way is with customer sweet spots. You develop brand communities. You develop other ways to be an active partner in what the customer is interested in. And you can do it by signature stories. Stories that are narratives, that have a wow factor, and communicate or motivate a strategic message. So that's what I have. I think that those things will all help you. And we have some questions here. That's a really good question. First of all, you got to make sure it's not working. It's far better to have a brand that is consistent over time. If you look at all the strong brands, they often have something that is really consistent over time. And even Wells Fargo Bank has a stagecoach. This image of a stagecoach, because Wells Fargo used to be a stagecoach company. And the stagecoach has got a lot of nice attributes with it, but it means get you there on time. It means reliability. It means adventuresome. It means energy. It means integrity. And these stagecoach used to have a safe that you put your money in, so it's got a lot of heritage, and it's very different. All the other banks are the same. Wells Fargo stands out. But the bankers at Wells Fargo that engaged in these very wealthy customers, and the other bankers that engaged with business to business, they wanted businesses that wanted a checking account and they wanted credit lines and so on. And they said, Stagecoach doesn't work for us. These businesses want a line of credit and they want a checking account. And the Stagecoach, they don't want Old West, doesn't work. We got to have something that shows that we're innovative and reliable and contemporary and modern. And the people dealing with these wealthy people said the same thing. So they're going to do away with the Stagecoach. That would have been really stupid. They've got this marvelous image, this symbol, and they're going to do away with it. And finally, they were convinced not to do that. And so these people, what they have to do is they have to adapt. They have to sort of bring the Stagecoach to make it relevant for their group, or they can use it as a symbol, but of reliability. But they develop other characteristics, other elements of the brand vision for them that'll work for these other audiences. So they augment the Stagecoach. It's not the 100% of their vision. So anyway, my first advice is to be careful before you change something that has got some traction. Let's make really sure it's not working. Let's make really sure we can replace it with something else, because when you change it, it's a very difficult job unless you got something really compelling. You should be careful about doing that. But having said that, it's certainly possible to change, and sometimes it is necessary to change. And so what you need is a new brand vision and a way to get it there. And probably what you need is some kind of visible program or some kind of something that will give you credibility in the new space and authenticity. And that's not easy, but it's possible. Now, actually, the MetLife company is moving away from the Snoopy characters, and they still want to be warm and approachable, but they their access to it disappeared. So that was a problem, and they thought that they needed something more contemporary. So they are actually changing their personality, and you can observe how they're doing that with clothing. They invite other clothing people to join them and have environmental standards and environmental programs, and they develop industry-wide environmental programs as well. But it turns out that doesn't really undercut their ability to get a big reputation in that area, because they're the leaders, and they're known as the leaders, and they stand out as the leaders. They're the exemplar of that. And so even though they invite others to join them, it does dilute a little bit their higher purpose association, but really it by taking a leadership position, it really enhances them rather than detracts. So if you're thinking about Elon Musk and Patagonia, they have really done that well. And I think if you have a sincere, authentic passion for your higher purpose, it's natural for you to leverage that in some way. Another example is Salesforce.com has got something called 111. They give 1% of their business. They like 1% of sales they put into a pot which they use to fund all kinds of public service things. They give 1% of their employees' time to do social good, and they give 1% of their product. So 1% of their product will go to not-for-profits that need software help. And so they've done enormous good by this program. And one of the things they've done is try to get others to do the same program. So they have challenged other firms to also do this 111 program. And they've got 75 other firms that have signed on that also have the 111 program. I mean, can you imagine the leverage that they've got? It's probably 100 times what they would have had if they only did it themselves. And they get even more credit, even more visibility for these social programs than they would have before. So I think especially for low involvement, to have a social higher purpose or environmental higher purpose, that's really big opportunity for you. And look what it's done to Avon, and look what it's done to Lifebuoy. It's given them a lot of energy and visibility. Another thing about higher purpose in that context is this story of Barclays Bank. Barclays Bank at one point was the least trusted bank in the least trusted industry there was. And they developed a higher purpose that basically involved doing good for the community and the people in it. And they let their employees develop programs. They developed 40 programs. They packaged 4 of these programs and told signature stories around them. And these stories developed, were able to change the trust remarkably. And all the numbers went up, but a particularly trust one, a number that had been resistant to any kind of advertising program they did. So the lesson here is that, you can be in a really bad situation, and you can use a higher purpose to create stories that can change things for you, that can change the conversation. So it's it's the concept of a social or environmental higher purpose is really important, and it represents a big opportunity for low involvement or transactional companies. Somebody else asked about highly regulated industries like tobacco and alcobev. How do you go about tapping the customer sweet spots? That's really, really a tough question. And especially the tobacco industry, my goodness, it's so regulated. There's not much you can do. If you went to a branded program like the Lifebuoy did, you probably couldn't talk about that because of their restrictions. And so I think if I were in that business, I'd look for adjacent businesses that could use some of their assets, like their distribution assets and so on, and use that brand as a vehicle to use some of these mechanisms I've been talking about. And I don't know what concept of a higher purpose has gotten a lot of interest, and it's really quite amazing to me if you look at companies throughout the world, how many of them are really developing a higher purpose. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. One is the right thing to do, and I see some more questions are running up. 3 fundamental changes you would make to accommodate a changing landscape and audience behavior. I don't think I'd make any change in the brand vision model, but in terms of implementing the model, I think that we have to recognize that it's a digital world now. And so that gives us a lot of tools to work with, but it also gives a lot of challenges. So I think that my new book will talk about competing in a digital world, so I've been doing a lot of thinking about that. But that's really what's changed. Why great brands tend to be devilish as becoming successful as Facebook, Google, and Uber? Well, I think that a brand that is it's got a sense of humor, that doesn't take itself seriously, has a lot of advantages, because humor is really powerful. It can entertain. It can. It tends to make a brand liked. If the brand is humorous, he'll be liked. It'll have a lot of good qualities, and some brands it's pretty hard to be too humorous, because it sort of means they're maybe not serious and reliable. But the brands that can be humorous, and a little bit of that in Google, but Facebook and Uber, I wouldn't call it too devilish or humorous. But the brands that can have a sense of humor, like there's a brand in America called the Dollar Shave Club, and they use all kinds of rather outrageous humor, and people accept it because of the nature of that brand. When you want to communicate the technology advantage of your offering, how do you combine a human story and technology without diluting the tech message? That's a good question. I think that in a technology, especially in a B2B context, that you're not so much talking about emotion or entertainment in your story. What you're looking for is a story that has high relevance. So what we do in a B2B thing, we'll have a lot of case studies, sometimes 100 of them, and they will all have little different contexts, little different problems, little different settings in terms of the industry or whatever. And so what we do is we're able to generate a story that's extremely relevant to a customer. And here's a story about somebody that it's in your kind of industry, your kind of problem, and here's what they did. And they used our product to solve this huge problem. And it might not be emotional, it might not be humorous, but it's highly relevant. Because he can say, yeah, that's the kind of industry I'm in. That's the kind of problem I have. And so that solution is really relevant to me. So, you know, especially in a B2B case, relevance is, you know, it's kind of the name of the game. My whole point in pointing out these three different types of higher purpose is that people think about a purpose as a purpose, but I think you can have multiple purposes, and you can actually have all three of those. Some brands have all three of those, but as separate purposes, not as a single purpose that covers all of those different situations. So it's really tough to select the best thing. How do I move this down? Oh, I want to move it back up. Where was that one that had the Yeah, I think a really good question was this one that talked about Elon Musk and how you might attract competitors to join you, and isn't that a bad thing? And I thought it was really a good thing. So that was one of the most interesting questions. So but anyway, I really thank you for inviting me to join you and
David,
and bearing with us. We I think got the technical problem solved. And I thought it worked out well. Is there
So David, we would like to announce the winner of the best question chosen by you. It's Ankit Singh Leo Burnett. Is he around? Congratulations, Ankit. He gets a prize, and we will be giving him on behalf of you. So
okay, thank you for that.
Please come forward, Ankit. Yes, of course. You can take a selfie
and have a
with
wonderful
him.
event.
Can you, yes, keep the camera on him. So this is the winner, David. Can you see him?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Can we have, okay, I'll give it to you on behalf of. Congratulations. Thank you so much, Ankit. Thank you so much, David. That was a very, very engaging session. I hope you had fun as much as we did.